going through perimenopause and menopause just really doesn't have to suck if you go into it well trained. And I'm seeing, this is the side ball I was going to throw at you. There's a big movement right now with a lot of the hormone savvy docs out there who are allopathically trained, and they're just coming around to the fact that we need to be strength training. And they all started strength training in their 50s. And I think that's great. And I'm really glad this movement is happening. But some of us have been over here for decades, and I know you're in this boat trying to get this message out, and we're being dismissed for being meatheads or for being, I was telling my girlfriend this morning, I was kind of on a rant because I've been reading all of these menopause books that have come out lately, and I really do respect a lot of these influencers, but they're like, I discovered strength training in my 50s, and I discovered that we need to use HRT after decades in practice. And I'm like, yo, what the F took you so long? That's great, but it's a little late, to be honest. Like, applying hormones and trying to build muscle later it works. You can do it, but such a better idea to start early. And my complaint was, I have been applying to speak at conferences for as long as I can tell you, and I have been turned away repeatedly, to deep frustration on my part, because they're like, well, this isn't right for our audience because, none of our doctor audience strength trains, and how do they get their patients to do it? And there's all these hurdles. And I'm like, dude, this is non-negotiable. And they're like, well, do the exercise you like and just have them walk and do yoga. And I'm like, oh my gosh, for F's sake, I have been trying so hard to get this message out and met with such a wall of frustration. And I think it's because I don't have the right letters behind my name. I think that might have something to do with it. But man, I'm glad it's catching on, but really a little too late.
It is. And it's so good that it's catching on. But, the culture has been lied to about the benefits of strength training. The examples of strength training that we had were these extreme bodies that really don't represent any of the average person. I mean, look, if you just bar the last maybe 15 or 20 years, because now we have like studies are coming out and it's great. But when I was training people, like, go find me a study on strength training and longevity. You couldn't find one. Now why is that? Well, it's easy to get a rat to run on a treadmill, right? It's hard to get them to pump iron. So I think that's part of it, right? Part of it was animal studies. It's easy to get them to run in circles, and we see the value and the benefits. And then a big part of it was the media. The first examples of strength training that we saw in popular media were those Muscle Beach movies of the 60s. And how did they depict people that lifted weights? Like these big, self-absorbed, morons, right? These big, doofuses or whatever. And then you had Pumping Iron with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was charismatic. But again, it's the pro bodybuilding space. Any example of fitness that we saw was typically some kind of cardiovascular type workout. It wasn't strength training. Now, athletics, they adopted strength training sooner because, well, sports are objective. You win or you don't, right? So you had football was one of the first sports, and all of a sudden the guys that lifted were, smashing all the other guys. So next thing you know, football takes it. Next was baseball. Now, like, you can't find a single athletic event or sport that doesn't incorporate strength training. All incorporate strength training because strength is the foundational physical pursuit. It's actually the one that contributes to the rest. In other words, if right now everybody got 10% stronger, they would also automatically get more mobility, more stamina, more endurance. Okay, that's not true for the rest. If I gave everybody more endurance, they wouldn't see more strength necessarily. So strength is the foundational physical pursuit that contributes to all the rest. And so the sports saw this, but still pop culture, all we saw were big meathead bodybuilders. Most people don't want to look like them, which, by the way, I'm just going to be very clear. It's just so people don't, like, they hear that and they're like, yeah, I don't want to look like that, or especially women. I don't want to look like, like Sal talking on this podcast. Okay, first of all, there is a wide range of genetic response to any kind of, athletic stimulus. But let's just talk about strength training. The ability to build muscle sits on a spectrum, okay? Way over here, you have like pro bodybuilders and athletes. Way over here, you have like muscle wasting genetic diseases. 99.9% of us are in the middle. Okay. Now, to illustrate what I'm talking about, the people way over here, the super responders, they're about as common as people who are 7 feet tall. So think right now, besides going to an NBA game, when was the last time you saw someone that was 7 feet tall? Like, you remember it because it was so like crazy. Like, oh yeah, one time at the airport, I saw this guy who was 7 feet. Okay. That's how rare those genetics are. And if you have those, you know, because you're probably the buffest person always, everywhere, without ever having to work out, right? Then you add on top of that performance enhancing drugs. So, and now those are the people that for a long time were representing strength training. So we looked at these female bodybuilders and these male, and we're like, I don't want to look like that. You won't. You will not.
You won't.
You could try as hard as you want. You could even take all the steroids you want, and you wouldn't look like them, because that's just so rare. What would end up happening for everybody watching and listening to this is if you devoted, you know, it's a sizable percentage of your time to strength training, and you ate like a bodybuilder, and you were like, I'm going to bodybuild, and you did it for 5 years. Do you know what you would look like? A very fit person. You would just look like a very fit person. You would not look like a bodybuilder. So this fear, get it out of your head. It isn't going to happen. But that was a representation. So especially for women, they were like, no, I don't want to look like that. And then the gym industry and the fitness industry they just promoted it. And how did they promote it? They made pink dumbbells that weighed 2 pounds. I remember the first gym that I ran in, that I worked in, had a women's only area. This is back when gyms would do that.
I remember.
And I remember the gym, we had to close the gym for a holiday. And I remember walking in there, right? I'm like, what's in this women's only area? And it was the same equipment that we had in the open area. The difference was the upholstery was pink. And I remember being like, this is ridiculous. Like, why are we doing this? So it was just a bunch of lies, you know, don't build muscle, tone muscle. Like, you know, that's, by the way, that's a made up marketing term. I mean, tone is a word, but it doesn't mean the feeling of muscles that feel more solid. That's because you're building them. They either build or they shrink. They don't tone. They build or they shrink. And that's what you're looking for. So if you want muscles that feel solid, you just build them. That's all you got to do.
Right. You make them dense.
That's it. So yeah, so there's just lots of lies, but thankfully now I work out in a commercial gym. I see women lifting weights. I see them deadlifting and squatting and pressing. You know, I never saw that before. So it's moving in the right direction for sure.